Merry Christmas and welcome to Killer Concepts, where we theorize possible killers that could make it into the game, and talk about their abilities, their identity, and their perks. So, before we start, I want to preface the fact that most of the killers in this have actually been conceptualized before even Artist was introduced into the game, and this killer in particular bears an uncanny resemblance to a killer that I really don't like, Dredge, but in a way that I thought would make it more balanced, and in a different turn rather than a blindness, it's something else. So, without further ado, let's start. Welcome to Killer Concept, The Silence. Doman Wilczys had seen battle after battle in the Polish-Lithuanian War, rising to the ranks of an astute captain renowned for his compassion and mercy. He was one of the few who believed in sparing those who opposed the Kingdom of Poland, having been spared once himself by who was now his mentor. Now, he led his army into what would be the biggest battle he would see, the Battle of Grunwald. The captain seized victory, but at the cost of many lives, one of which his own son. Seeing the boy cut down before him, the captain lost his mercy. Even as the knights and mercenaries dropped their swords and began to run, he continued to slash at every one until no one was left standing but the Polish order. Word soon spread of the savage cruelty of the once generous Doman. A plot began to arise in the heart of Poland. Many of those whose family had been slain in the battle ambushed Doman on the road to Lithuania, dragging his weakened body through the streets whilst mocking the captain's fallen son. The bandits, 5 strong, tied him down atop a table and slowly killed him. First, they sewed his lips shut so he couldn't scream. Next, they cut off his left hand so he couldn't fight. Finally, they skinned his other palm, placing hot coals inside the exposed muscle to burn out his sins. Finally, they sliced open his eyes so he could never see the kingdom that he helped make. The laughing of the bandits rang in his ears, becoming a quiet buzz as the hours progressed. As Doman bled, he grabbed his sword from the nearby table, striking his foes after cutting himself free. Even after they were dead, the captain continued to strike, until his blade broke. As Doman collapsed to the ground, he began to hear whispers from the shadows, those whispers calling his name, closer and closer, until there was silence. The Silence. The killer has 2 abilities, being that of Deafening Presence and Deafening Blow. Deafening Presence is a trap-type attack that, when set, causes a 15-meter radius around it. Survivors can destroy these, but they can also be removed if the killer puts more of these out than available. When inside the radius, survivors suffer noise distortion, and when the killer moves through them, he gives the undetectable status while inside and for 10 seconds after leaving. Deafening Blow is an explosive projectile that upon hitting a survivor will cause the deafen effect. This has 4 stages. 1. Audio distortion. 2. Audio softening. 3. No terror radius or skill check notifications. 4. Complete silence. The distortion effect would cause a motion blur or whooshing type effect to appear in audio. Audio softening would quiet the audio by around 50%. The effect of deafening is not permanent, though, as survivors can pick up sirens found around the map to reverse this process. This would create a loud noise which would reveal the survivors to the killer upon picking them up, and the reversal of the effect depends on what stage of the effect you got to. The more severe the deafen, the longer it would take for the siren to reverse it. Add-ons. Iridescent. Reforged Blade. Players with Tier 4 deafness are exposed. Binding Chains. As long as one player has Tier 4, all other players suffer from exhaustion and are oblivious until someone goes down. Purple. Serrated Blade. Players hit while under the effects of Tier 3 or above suffer from the broken status until deafen is removed. Ruby Pommel. Players that use the siren are hindered for 30 seconds. Bloody Iris. Players that are inside the deafening presence are afflicted with the blind status effect until out of chase. Missing Flesh. Player hit with direct hits from Deafening Blow are slowed. Gold Guard. Successful attacks give Bloodlust for 5 seconds. Green. Suture Needle. Increases the amount of time you remain undetectable after exiting Deafening Presence by 15 seconds. Blade fragment. Players hit while under second stage or more of deafen are afflicted with the mangled status. Rotting hand. Players hit while under the effects of deafen stage 3 or more gain the trigger finger status effect for 30 seconds. Trigger finger causes the inability to heal or mend yourself or others. Splintered handle. Hitting a survivor while under the effects of deafen stage 1 or more inflicts deep wound status effect. Gray iris. After hitting a player with indeafening presence, killer instinct activates on players suffering from deafen. Steel pommel. Players that use Siren have auras revealed for 10 seconds. Steel guard. Successful hits give bloodlust for 3 seconds. Leather grip. Decreases the recharge rate of deafening blow by 4 seconds. Comfortable hilt. Increases maximum deafening blow charges by 3. Through tang handle. Increases maximum range of deafening presence by 15 meters. Yellow. Decrepit hand. Players hit while under the effects of deafen stage 3 or more gain the trigger finger status effect for 15 seconds. Tight stitching. Increases the maximum amount of traps that can be set out by 2. Sewing needle. Increases the maximum time you remain undetectable after exiting deafening presence by 10 seconds. Fine blade. Players hit while under the effects of deafen tier 2 suffer the oblivious status effect for 20 seconds. Cloth grip. Decreases the recharge rate of deafening blow by 2 seconds. Straight hilt. Increases maximum deafening blow charges by 2. Fine handle. Increases maximum range of deafening presence by 10 meters. Fine pommel. Players that use Siren suffer blind for 10 seconds. Bone handle. Increases the amount of time required to use Siren by 10 seconds. Brown. Shattered blade. Players hit while under the effect of deafen tier 2 speed bonus lasts 0.2 second less time. Shattered handle. Increases maximum range of deafening presence by 5 meters. Wood handle. Increases the audio distortion of deafening presence by 15%. Wooden pommel. Players that use Siren are exhausted for 5 seconds. Loose stitching. Increases the maximum amount of traps you can set out by 1. Rusty needle. Increase the amount of time you remain undetectable after exiting deafening presence by 5 seconds. Dull blade. Players hit while under the effects of deafen tier 2 are inflicted with the blind status effect for 3 seconds. Preserved hand. Players hit while under the effects of deafen tier 3 are inflicted with trigger finger for 10 seconds. Torn grip. Decreases the amount of time required to place deafening presence by 50%. Uncomfortable hilt. Increases maximum deafening blow charges by 1. Blade sliver. Splash damage range increased by 0.3 meters. Hot coals. All blood points gained through the use of deafening presence or deafening blow are increased by 100%, but you cannot reach deafen stage 4. Mori. The silence flips over his sword to deliver a murder strike, or, in other words, hitting the survivor with the guard of the sword rather than the blade, to a downed survivor. He then stands above the downed survivor, and as a small ringing can be heard, it soon turns to a high-pitched ringing, which will happen until blood comes from the eyes, ears, and nose of a survivor. He then picks up his sword and stands back up. Perks. Scourge Hook, Eerie Silence. Scourge Hook, Eerie Silence calls upon the entity to randomly spawn 4 Scourge Hooks on the map. After hooking a survivor on a Scourge Hook, you gain the undetectable status until you hit a survivor, perform an action, or the survivor is unhooked. The undetectable status stays for 15, 30, 45 seconds after the survivor is unhooked. Silent Nature. Survivors will not hear the screams of other survivors nor the crying of other survivors. All aura reading abilities on downed survivors are delayed by 2, 3, or 4 seconds, as are the statuses of survivor as seen on the left of the screen. Hex, Silent Killer. After having killed the obsession by any means, Hex Silent Killer activates. While active, you gain the undetectable status, and the nature of silence grows to you. Grunts of pain and breathing are 15, 20, 25% louder when facing the direction of the survivor. The appearance of the killer would be that of a 14th century knight. He would have no helmet on and longer hair, but he would also have his lips sewn shut, as when said in the story. He would have an eye patch covering one eye to, protect it from any infection that would happen from a dead body, having its eye basically removed. And its weapon would be that of a broken sword. It would be broken at about the halfway mark, leaving a jagged, uneven edge that is unfit for cutting. This would be his main way of using a weapon. His animation, ideally, for setting out a deafening blow would be putting his palm to the ground and slowly raising up, for deafening presence, I mean. This would create a small totem-like structure that would emit the deafening presence sound from it. His deafening blow animation would be almost the appearance of fire growing inside of his hand, much similar to that of Nurse. When it is completely full, the glowing would eventually reach out from in between his fingers, and when he is using the attack, he would simply thrust forward with his hand, much like with Nurse. This killer, I feel, would be a good implement to the game, even though he would be overshadowed by a much less even version of himself being Dredge, and that's why I said in the beginning that this was actually made before Dredge. It's very similar on paper, which is inhibiting one of the survivor's main ways of knowing where you are, which is sound rather than sight. That being said, I still do think it'd be fair enough to play against, especially because there is decent counterplay to him. It gives him enough of a way to be able to have counters in the form of not being able to continually have somebody deafened because of the sirens, but also it would make the survivors go out of their way to do this. And unlike with someone like Dredge, it's not a one-time action. These sirens would ideally be something similar to Freddy. They would keep popping up over and over and over until the game ends. That being said, you could have some sort of perk which makes the length of time that a siren takes to regenerate longer, or an add-on in this scenario. But for now, that is all for this time. If you guys liked, leave a like, leave a comment, and why not subscribe? You'll be helping out a small channel, and I will see you in the next video. Goodbye.